Je m'appelle Sasuke Uchiwa.
No, that's my shtick.
Welcome to Casuals of Runeterra, episode 57. I'm your host, Ryan, here with your other host, Je m'appelle Sasuke Uchiwa.
No, that's my shtick. I'm the one that makes us laugh at the intro.
I'm here with Hatch.
Oh, damn you, Mr. Uchiwa.
They'll never know. They'll never know the source.
You know what? In fact, we'll pay attention to the housekeeping, because if you do understand what we're laughing about, I want you to hit us up just so that we can laugh together while the plebes don't know.
Please, if you do know, messages and be like, I know what you're talking about. You can listen to us everywhere, as usual, including Amazon now. Follow us on Twitter. That's the easiest way to keep up to date on episodes. That's at podcastcor. That's podcastcor. And you can email us at the same name, podcastcor@gmail.com. Leave a like, follow, and short review / comment. Doesn't have to be massive at anywhere you listen. That definitely helps us get some visibility. And tell a friend to heed the warning signs by listening to the Casuals of Runeterra podcast.
Man, what do they need warning from?
The harrowing.
The harrowing's coming.
Today we're talking about another story. You know, these new segments we're doing. We're going through stories, digging into them deep after giving you some champion content. For this one, you're definitely going to want to listen to the Kalista episode. And then some of the other Shadow Owls based episodes. It doesn't hurt to listen to the Sentinels of Light stuff that we've done and the other stories that revolve around the Sentinel of Light episodes. Those will help you understand this a bit more. But this is one of those stories, and the one we're talking about today is In Sight of Land. This is one of those stories that, Hetch and I kind of agree are one of the better ones out of, the many that Riot has given us. And it's one of the longer ones, but it's written so well that you almost don't need the Riot pieces that are added on top of it to give it that lore flavor. It's just well done from a, short film at a Cannes festival type thing.
Yeah. And it really is one of those things where the Riot pieces are just kind of added on as flair of just a reminder that it is connected to the overarching story. But we wanted to talk about it not only because it is just a really good story. So if you have a chance and you're interested in reading that stuff, just go and read In Sight of Land. You will enjoy it. It's good. But we also wanted to touch on it because the Sentinels of Light comic, the whole buildup is around the coming of a harrowing. It's a big harrowing. It's a harrowing that scared all the veteran Sentinels of Light. And that is something that's referenced in Akshan's backstory. It references kind of Senna's whole return to Runeterra. So we kind of wanted to touch on what is a harrowing? Why are they so absolutely afraid of a harrowing? And this story, it paints the picture well.
Yeah, it does so very well. And let's hop into it, because like we said, this is a long one. We're going to try to not bore you to sleep as we dig into this.
All right, I'll take the first nap.
You'll take the first nap, take the first shift. So this story starts off on an airy body of water, cold night, sky filled with shadow, but these are the shadows of Tendrils, which we've explained before as mist and mist wraiths. But this one is projected as a larger than life one. We get mentions of harrowings here, like Hetch mentioned, and you can think of a harrowing at this point as a just natural disaster, an occurrence that people expect, an occurrence that people prepare for, and they have, their recovery period afterwards. It's the best example I can think of, and Hetch, if you agree with this, is like a hurricane. in the real world.
Yeah, I like the a hurricane. Like referencing it to a hurricane is perfect too, because the more that we dive into these stories, the more that you're going to see that Bilgewater kind of experiences harrowings the most, and it's because they're on the coast, so they are just physically closer to to the Shadow Isles than most everyone else. Well, they're closer than everyone on Valoran, which is the continent, like the mainland of Runeterra, where Ionia is probably the closest to the Shadow Isles, but Ionia also is very in touch with the spiritual side. So they have a lot of like defenses against that stuff. So for them, it's not really the same as everywhere else. Whereas Bilgewater, they ain't got any of that spiritual side. Yeah. Like they even kind of like pinpoint the weirdos who are spiritual. So they really do just like, oh, looks like another harrowing's coming. my sister down in Sharima, she said I could stay with her for a few weeks, but
yeah.
This is my fourth one. This ain't got nothing on Andrew that came through back in 92. So board up. I'm just going to board up, keep the mist wraiths out,
board up and hunker down.
Hunker down, drink a Graggy Ice.
Graggy Ice. Yeah, so this mention of a harrowing here, and one of the bigger ones, because there's a mention that the sky just looks different than usual, kind of gives us a time frame based on what we know. So if you've listened to our Akshan episode and the Akshan adjacent episodes, the mentions of Shadia, and she was preparing for what she felt in her heart as a sentinel of light, the biggest harrowing to come yet. So this could be the same one being referenced here, which gives us a time frame of what's going to happen in this story. So we get another scene of, the night sea kind of usually is still, but it's littered with driftwood and bodies. Something has just happened, and we're introduced to the first character in the story, which is Tudri. Or I think it's Tudri, right?
Yeah, we make the rules of how it's pronounced. So it's Tudri now.
Yeah, Tudri.
Those are facts. And as far as like getting introduced to Tudri is some of the best writing in this whole story. Like it really does just kind of set the tone of like, okay, strap in, like grab your popcorn. This is gonna be a ride.
Exactly. So Tudri is represented to us as a survivor. There's plenty of bodies, driftwood, but he's on a hunk of wood by himself, and he seems to be the only one within miles. So he's probably the only survivor that we know of from a attempt at an abandoned ship. And he's lost his voice during this time frame, and he's also stuck to this hunk of wood, and his body's slowly becoming colder and colder, and he's starting to slip into this sense of delirium, but he's trying to maintain focus and keep his legs moving because he has this feeling that he's close to land based on his experience.
Yeah, and this also at the beginning, like if we look at a lot of the Bilgewater champions, like especially characters like Nautilus and Pike, we see that there is another spiritual element as far as a lot of the Bilgewater characters, which is the spirits of the ocean itself. And at this point of the story, we don't really have like a pinpoint of what is haunting Tudri yet. There are mentions that, that he could feel this, he could feel a siren calling to him, or like essentially a siren, and he would be given rest and peace if he would just let the water into his lungs. And it's like, okay, like, are we talking wraiths, or are we talking weird tentacle things and Ilaoi coming out of the water? Like, what's going on here?
Yeah, is there more to it, per se? So we get that view of him, and then we get a sense of what happened, right? He talks about, originally his ship was sailing. He's thinking about the events that happened led to this point. His ship was sailing to what we got as Fahlgren, which is a small island off the Valerian coast. So that's kind of what he's pedaling towards. He's thinking that it has to be close based on how fast we were moving. And then suddenly, out the side of his good eye, So now we're getting more details about Tawdry. Good eye. So either he has like one milky eye, like cataracts, or he has like an eye patch, kind of like your classic swashbuckling pirate type. But he gets a shot of something coming closer, and it looks like this oily vellum, animal skin parchment that was used for like maps and other things, drifting closer. So he grabs it, and this piece of map essentially has some navigation charts roughly scribbled on it. He's like, okay, cool. This is something that kind of reassures his thought that he's close to land, right? And then we get a flashback. So this is the first time we're shifting focus from present to past. And it starts with this quote that from him that says, "You're insane," right? And it drops us into the scene of a ship preparing to go off into a storm. And the person guiding that ship is no other than Tawdry himself. This is interesting because we get this scene between Tawdry and another character introduced as Mr. Bowsy, which is a funny name.
Okay, like this whole like the going into the flashback too, because like I'm gonna end up saying this a lot. I would love to see this story as an animation.
Yep.
And it's because like I could see now of just the whole like Leo DiCaprio in Titanic just like freezing to death in the water, and then just like disembodied voice, "You're insane," and then like that triggers the flashback.
Yeah.
And then but then like combine it with like Mr. Bowsy so that it just looks like Shmee from the Hook movie. I want to see this. I want to see
Mr. Bowsy. Yeah, so we get this discussion between Tawdry and Mr. Bowsy. Tawdry kind of is given this, we get the sense that he's in some position of power because Mr. Bowsy's like, hey, we shouldn't take this mission. Like, we shouldn't take this mission. We shouldn't go. We should hunker down like the rest of the ships. Tawdry is essentially calling him weak and saying, listen, if we go fast, we're one of the faster ships. The faster we go, the faster we get rich. And he kind of mocks other ships for being so cautious and taking this storm/harrowing seriously. And Mr. Bowsy mentions, this current harrowing, based on what they might encounter, is just not worth it, right? It's the equivalent of like you've seen in plenty of Hollywood movies where they decide to sail into that storm. They know it's coming, but they want to get the big catch. And it's never worth it.
And it definitely makes sense too, because it is like Bilgewater is very much like a pirate island. Like there's the idea of the ship that makes its money by going out sailing and looking for treasure or potentially raiding. If you're seeing a storm where no one's going to go out, and then of course it's just like you get your pick of the litter then, right?
Yep.
What could go wrong? Let's talk about what could go wrong.
So Bowsy makes this mention. Tawdry finally tells him, listen, if you don't like it, leave it. All right. You can leave and you can take any deckhand you want that doesn't want to go as well. And that just means more riches for him, more spoils for him. So that classic pirate mindset. But, he also refused. So Bowsy's final plea is like, let's just put it to a vote for all the crew. And he says, no, not this time. We're doing this. So we get kind of a view of, it's interesting that we start off with seeing someone so helpless, being a last survivor, stranded, but then we start to see this guy wasn't that great. He was actually a dog ship, captain of some sort, leading them into what we'll find out more about this situation.
Yeah, I mean, he was a confident captain that was ultimately commanded by his greed.
Mm-hmm.
And we can safely say that since, it is a dude gripping driftwood. I doubt he was the captain of a crew on a piece of driftwood.
So this,
I will say, because I did some deep diving because I'm a nerd. So Fahlgren is an island that is located off of one of the far eastern coasts of Noxus.
Okay.
Kind of close to like the Piltover area.
Okay.
I kind of get where Tawdry's coming from too, because yes, it's a harrowing coming, but you're also sailing away from these Shadow Isles. So it's just like, we get there, we get back, we're good.
Yeah. So we cut back to the current scene. of Tawdry on the driftwood, and he's recalling these memories, right? That's kind of how we're getting these viewpoints. And he begins to feel weird, as if the atmosphere around him is changing and shifting. It's become more ominous, and he starts to feel pressure in his head as well. Now, this is a part where I want to make a quick point, is that if you've listened to our other Shadow Owl episodes about spectrification, as we've called it in the past, just to reiterate, when that happens, when somebody's dying in the presence of mist that's going to, ostensibly turn them into a specter, they start to feel a specific like personality trait or a specific thing, and that's usually what carries over into their specter form. It's kind of this one track mindset based on a prominent feeling at your point of death, right? And this seems to be what they're trying to describe here, that he's starting to feel like he's getting closer to death, and he's starting to feel all these different memories culminate in this, what he's going to be in a specter form.
Yeah, and it also is like chiming back to the beginning where he's feeling all of this, the kind of, like, for lack of a better way of describing it, the spiritual pressure
Yeah.
around him, like this idea of like, oh, there's peace and rest for me if I let the water into my lungs.
Yeah.
And it kind of goes in with that of just like, now he's like really starting to like go into the single focus that the wraiths have, and he has to shake that as far as trying to survive. Like, that is what he's shaking more than the actual physical stress of being adrift in the ocean.
Exactly. And, due to great writing, we know he's stubborn, and he starts to get inside his own head and tell himself, I'm not weak. I'm not like them. I'm a survivor. I'm used to these situations. So he's gripping onto his mental state at a pure stubbornness in his, personality. And that allows him to keep on. It's almost these, I have it written down as these spouts of empty platitudes of bravado to pump himself up, get the adrenaline pumping, even though his teeth are chattering, right? So it's like this weak, meager situation where he's still trying to feel like he's in control. And he then reassures himself that land is close, inside of land, hint, hint.
Yeah.
Right.
And it's at this point that I do really kind of find myself like enjoying Tawdry's character too, because this is where like he's forcing himself to physically speak as well. Like, so he's speaking to nothing essentially, or he's speaking into his madness.
Yeah.
But he's saying a boat's made for sailing. So yeah, I've done that run a dozen times. Can't live this life if you ain't the daring sort.
Exactly.
And it's like, yeah, like that. It kind of gives like the feeling of really successful pro athletes. Like, a lot of times their ego is bigger than their athletic ability, but they have to be that way because they always have to be on.
Exactly.
So his character is already enjoyable. And again, we're just like not even halfway through a short story.
Oh, dude. Yeah.
It
gets better. So he's continuing to drift as he's kicking, trying to get the land, and he begins to drift into this field of debris. Now, this isn't where he's guiding it, which is another sense of something else acting upon the situation. But he's trying to avoid the field of debris because, he's a weathered professional, despite his personality. And he knows that, you get caught up in debris, it can bring you down. And he starts to see this piece of sailcloth coming closer and closer to him, despite him trying to avoid it. He attempts to move it aside so he doesn't get tangled in it, but unfortunately his arm gets stuck up to the elbow, and then we go rushing into another bout of memories from a flashback.
And oh boy, now this is where we start breaking into what is a harrowing.
Mm-hmm.
So if it hasn't been clear yet, this second flashback is going to be starting off with Tawdry yelling out, hold fast, secure that line. And he's yelling at a ship that is being ripped to pieces by a harrowing.
Yeah.
And this is where we start getting some descriptions of a harrowing, but I do like that we don't have like too many descriptions, because one of the issues with the harrowing is that it's all consuming.
Yes.
It's all terrifying. So if you're not hunkered down, or if you're not just playing out a dodge, you're gonna die. Like, you're just gonna die.
Yeah, and that also lends to like the stories we hear about harrowings tend to vary, because the people who were in them tend not to make it back. So we get the scene of trapped in the storm. We hear yelling. The crew is, running to their positions, trying to hold fast. And you get the scene of violent rain, winds, the obvious mist kind of getting closer and creeping aboard the ship and beating up the ship itself, its patrons. And, this ship he mentions is usually a faster ship. But because of the situation, we learn that not only did they decide to go out, but they raided the ships that were left behind for spoils from the, more cautious captains to kind of emphasize how Tawdry looks down upon them for being cowards. And then we start to look at what's starting to happen to the patrons on board. Is okay, the spoils are slowing down the ship once again because of greed. Bowsy, unfortunately, is the first one to get lost in the darkness. Literally just gets tossed off the ship, never to be seen from again.
Yeah,
classic messenger energy.
And it's also written down as snatched. So we also we get in this flashback an idea that the harrowing is just a screaming mass of spirits. So there's also the chance that it was a mist wraith, literally just, hands on Bowsy, and then you're coming with me. Come on.
Yeah, you could even think of,
who knows?
if any of you listeners have watched The Mist or read Stephen King's The Mist, it's a great example. Like when they're in the supermarket, like whenever you see them interact with it, there's like these tendrils, and usually they're different and you don't know what's going on. People are disappearing, screams are disappearing, but it feels like they're near, but it's far because you're kind of in this bubble of the supernatural bubble.
That's a perfect example. This from Stephen King's The Mist. That's exactly how I imagine it.
And like most of Stephen King's work, usually the innocent people and the people who were cautious go first. So Bowsy's gone. The next guy that we get a vision of is a young boy named Flair, who's trying to secure the sail from essentially, ripping the ship in half. And he ends up getting carried off in a moment that Tawdry could have helped him, or Tawdry could have helped him. He decided not to, looked away, and the boy was gone in another moment. And he makes a comment here, which is disgusting, which is better him than me. Now, listen, first of all, I think we didn't say it, but I think most people know the captain always goes down with the ship. That's how it works, right? That's kind of the rule of thumb.
Hey, Tawdry, whatever, he is in the water right now. Yeah. He is not above the water. He is now down in the water, therefore he went down with the ship.
Okay. So Tawdry got it. He got it technically.
It says nothing about dying because your ship is gone. It's about going down with your ship. So he went ahead. He put his toes in the water. Yeah, and he's like, I've gone down with it real quick. And there you go. Oh, you damn straight.
The Lawyer of Bilgewater.
Before we go on, as far as with Tawdry dying, with Flair's death, that is when he gets snatched up. Well, it's the mast breaks and then it gets caught in the winds and it blows into the harrowing. Exactly. And what is written here, so verbatim, is Tawdry saw his eyes wide in terror as he flew into a cloud of twisted faces and outstretched, clutching hands. So that is about the only description of what a harrowing looks like that we get, because, again, most of the survivors of harrowings, they don't see it because that's how they survived it.
Yeah, and I'm happy you brought that up, because a lot of the art, if you look at the Legend of Runeterra cards for Mist Wraiths, have that visual, which is like either a face or a skull or hands or something like that in the mist. So that kind of aligns and gives us another connection there.
Yeah. And this is, I also kind of imagined the animation for the card Ruination, funnily enough, because like the Harrowing and Ruination both do very different things in the card game. But I imagine like the animation of Ruination, where it's just the hands coming up and just grab everything, nothing, no man left behind, just grab it all. But that we get this, sadly we get this depiction thanks to Flair's death. So you know, F in the chat for our boy Flair.
Oh yeah, don't worry, it gets worse. So, so Tudri obviously lets a young boy go and says his life is worth more. And he then comes back to the present with that thought. And he's continuing to fight with this sail that's kind of wrapped itself around his arm, and it's beginning to cling to him unnaturally at this point, where he can't get it off. So he fights with it to the point where he almost falls off the driftwood. And this pressure in his head's continuing to build and build and build. And he's having these outward arguments with himself, essentially claiming that everything he did was because he was the captain and he needed to survive to keep everybody else safe. He was trying to prolong his existence to help everyone else. And like that's he's trying to convince himself that.
See, and he's the protagonist.
He's the protagonist. He's the ultimate protag. Kirito-kun. Anyways, so so he finally ends up pulling himself free, but the cloth then wraps him around the driftwood facing underwater. Now, this is the part where he starts to finally start freaking out. And he opens his good eye, which is mentioned again. He starts just looking around the depths to see if he can see anything because it's dark, it's nighttime, it's murky waters, and he's seeing only bodies, and mainly the bodies of the men and women that he let die that night. And it was all due to his greed and his ignorance, and mainly his malice. Like he cared, it was self-preservation from the beginning, after a decision that involved everyone's life, without including them in it. And he's able to break free from this, probably out of complete and utter fear. And when he grasps for something, he ends up grabbing one of the remaining lifeboats, sorry. And a flashback begins, and this is the final flashback we're going to have before the conclusion of the story.
And with him having like this panic where he's finally starting to like break a little bit, the key point is that he's hearing when he opens his eyes underwater, he's actually recognizing that some of the debris is not debris, it's bodies of his crew. So then he hears voices, and the voices are saying that, they were the crew that relied on him and he betrayed them. And the key word there is betrayed. That will come up later. It will be on the quiz. All right. So remember the word betrayed.
Yeah. So we get the flashback, and now we're at the point in this catastrophe where people are running to lifeboats. And these are like not top of the line. These are rickety lifeboats. And crew members are yelling that, they're full. We need to get these people out, get them away from the boat on these. And Tawdry runs up, jumps the deck onto one of these boats that's completely full. And one of the crew members who's on the boat is like, hey, you can't hop on this. We're full. We're at capacity. This thing won't last if we overpack it. There'll be no point. Everyone will go to their doom. And Tawdry pulls him in nice and close and stabs him. Quick and easy, right through the gut, pulls the knife out, throws him overboard and says, there, we have one less. We can go now. This guy is the worst.
So I made a note here that it is this is akin to everyone's favorite Titanic scene. Go ahead, put that favorite scene of the movie Titanic in your mind.
Yeah.
And yes, it's the scene of the spoiled rich guy trying to get on the lifeboats with the women and children. But this time we have a Bilgewater twist, which is, hey, the guy says you can't get on, kill that guy.
Now you can.
Now the last image that Tawdry sees while he's also like getting onto the boat and saying, all right, cast off, we're good now, like killing one of his crew members to make enough room. The scene that he's seeing is the deck of the ship with a lot of his veteran crew members, so guys that he's done many raids with that are, and as far as what's written here, no strangers to violence, and they are fighting the Mistwraiths, and
Yes.
It is saying that these very battle-hardened veterans are being cut down like wheat by the Mistwraiths.
That's
So the harrowing is it's a nice buff to the
Yeah.
Shadow Isles here. Like they just like, no, there is still fighting. There's still fighting. We claim you or you get away. That's it.
The comments of the cries and the screams and them trying to plead with these things that don't understand what is happening. They're essentially just hunting. They're doing what mist wraiths do.
Oh God! You will cry out for mercy, and it will fall on deaf ears.
Yep. But yeah, so we get the scene of him obviously betraying the crew member, casting off, and he starts yelling at the people on the boat, convincing them that, you know, the strong live, the weak die. I shouldn't have to feel bad about this. I'm doing what we need to do for survival. And no one's like, who are you talking to? Who are you trying to make feel good? And it's himself. And this brings us back to the present again. And with him kind of overcome with this guilt, he still has that concept of land in mind that's giving him hope to keep on. And then he gets prod from behind by something. And he's like, well, nothing was there a while ago.
Now, hold on a second.
Well, now, hold on one second.
This is like a Scooby-Doo scene.
Yeah.
Like, ruh-roh.
Ruh-roh. So he turns around and notices there's spectral bodies of his crew all around him that weren't there previously. And with that, his head starts to fill with these cries of death and, you know, the last moments of these crew members all kind of like psycho attacking him, right? Which is something we've seen this in a lot of horror movies that deal with like possession and ghost, where they overwhelm the living senses, right? And it kind of causes despair within the person being attacked. So this is nothing too crazy here. But the good part, and the part that's like, okay, well, he's like, well, that's not cool. So he closes his eyes and he begins begging them to stop, insisting that he did nothing wrong. That he's like, I honestly tried the best. Listen, I'll give him this. He's a piece of shit. So he probably did try the best he could. But it was nowhere near good enough.
He's a piece of shit.
Yeah. So like he did his best. I believe him. So he's begging, and then finally the voices kind of go away, and he opens his eyes, and who's standing there, Hedge?
Well, he is begging and pleading, and let's not forget the word that he is hearing in his head.
Oh yeah.
The word that he is hearing in his head is betrayer.
Yeah.
And so yeah.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So if we're talking about a Shadow Isle story and the word betrayed, why is that important? Who is that important to? It's Kalista.
What?
So Kalista is not just here in the waters with Tawdry. Kalista is standing on the piece of the lifeboat, just all in her full glory, just like, oh, did someone call out betrayal?
Yeah. It's funny because the way he describes her is, you know, obviously she's still clad in an armor. She is this slim form, but she shouldn't be so weightless the way she's just standing there, given that everything we've been through the story with Tawdry and his driftwood. It's not, the driftwood hasn't been helping him out a good bit, right? It's a piece of driftwood, but she's staying on it kind of effortlessly, and she's looking down at him with blank eyes, unmoving, just kind of looking at him, or looking through him is probably a better way to explain that.
Looking through him is definitely the better way to explain it, but you know, it's the blank eyes, slim form, and a trio of spears that had been driven through her chest.
Exactly.
Like, there's no mistaking that this is. Hold on a second.
Yeah, and they're from the back out the front. That kind of helps you kind of understand a bit more.
I'm in danger.
I'm in danger. I immediately thought of the line, you know, the dead cried out for vengeance, and there its lady stood. That kind of justifies why she's there and what she's going to do. So he continues to try to reject responsibility because now he finally has a physical form to look at and use as a bouncing board for his ideas of like, listen, you believe me? Look at me. I tried. I gave it my best shot. And she's not giving him anything, not responding. All she does is lower her spear and put it to the tip of his throat, not piercing it, not cutting him, but slowly pushing him underwater. And this is one of the best scenes. I mean, this whole thing up to this point has been great, but she's pushing him with the spear slowly, and he's slowly drifting back, his head going lower and lower under the surface. And she holds him just under the surface, but he's no longer fighting back. Remember, this whole time, we've seen him fight with the map he grabbed, fight with the sail, fight with the driftwood, fight with himself. But at this moment, he's not even, like, it's not that his body's numb or anything. It's just like he's given up for some reason. And I mean, we know why.
Yeah, we know exactly why. It's a League of Legends rule. Creeps do not attack champions unless the enemy champion attacks a friendly champion.
Yep, it's canon.
It's canon now. But I do like as well that like with the whole line of like they called out for vengeance and the lady came.
Yeah.
Because then like from that point, like whenever Tawdry is looking at Kalista and trying to describe something on Kalista, it is as Lady Vengeance.
Yeah.
So it kind of gives this idea that there is folklore already within the people, like the communities of Bilgewater that is built around Kalista. Like it sounds like people have seen Kalista and lived to tell the tale before, and then it just evolved into an urban myth. So there's just like, this is the story that my parents would tell me when I was a kid. You know, this is the boogeyman of Bilgewater, except now she's real and she's got her spear at my throat and she's pushing me underwater. Well, mommy.
Yeah. And, you know, where it kind of ends here is him slowly getting pushed, and he's right under the surface, so he gets a view of her as he's finally drifting away. And everything goes silent. The water finally becomes still again. Everything becomes still again. And he begins to sink. And along with him, his crew begins to sink again, those ghostly figures. And all the light fades. And that is the end of Tawdry. And he drifts lower and lower into the depths. And as it mentions at the end of the story, just in sight of land.
Hey, he knew it.
Yeah.
He knew it. He was right. He was right. Land had to be close. I'm almost there. I'm almost there.
This one is, it's good. Like even after listening to this episode, we recommend you go read it. Because it's just well written all around. The story still holds weight if you've listened to this and read it yourself. Because the way it bounces, it's kind of shifting into our, you know, end of the episode, kind of the analysis of us, how we feel about it. So this is mine, is that it does a great job of quickly setting you up to sympathize with Tawdry, to say, oh, he's a survivor, he's the last guy, this must be shocking. Then you start to get pieces of, oh, he's kind of, you know, aggressive, this is kind of his fault. Then you see how he treats crew members, and then you see the final moments of how everyone kind of perished around him due to a lot of his involvement. And then we finally get this scene with Kalista that, if you know Kalista's story, you're already in her corner as far as one of the specters that has a story that's easy to sympathize with, being betrayed. So to see her pop up at the end, the ghostly figure, the supposed scary thing, is like, no, the true monster is in the water before her. And that's what's being, that's who you're rooting for, is Kalista at the end of the story. And that's good writing. It's a short story. I mean, it's longer than some, but it's short.
For a short story, the amount of depth in this is absolutely incredible. And as far as my ending notes here, it would not be a lore heavy episode until I take a deep dive on something that's just ignorant.
Yeah.
So I like to think, or my idea here, all right, is Kalista just pushes Tawdry under the water.
Yeah.
And it's just like, okay. But like pushing Tawdry under the water isn't necessarily Kalista, you know, just being like, haha, vengeance. But it's also like a rejection from the harrowing. So now she's left him to the spirits of the ocean.
Yep.
So then Tundri is just getting double screwed.
Yeah.
By both the harrowing and whatever old gods are down beneath the water.
Listen to our Nautilus episode if you haven't. Listen, we make this comment a lot in our Bilgewater episodes that, you know, there's so much about the harrowing and so many things that are dangerous on land. And you learn about what's in the water, and you're like, wait a minute. There's no winning.
Why do people live here? People live here.
You have the void, you have the harrowing on land, and then in the water you have unspeakable horrors and ancient monsters.
And you can't even run out to the frozen wasteland to get away from it all, because apparently that's where like the beginning of the next end is happening.
Yeah. And don't climb a mountain, because you're just going to interact with some celestials that win.
Yeah, if you climb a mountain, the stars will kill you outright. Why do people live here?
Yeah.
No wonder the people of Piltover and Zon are just like, no, we're happy here.
Yeah.
We're good here.
Yeah.
All right. And it's just like, well, what about all these other threats? They're not real. We believe in science, and we're happy here.
It's funny you mentioned that, because that was my thought reading this in this despair of a Runeterra, that Piltover Zon is a very isolated place compared to everywhere else. And I think we're going to have at some point a storyline from Riot where it opens up to the world, almost like a flash to, if you want to take a look at Marvel and how when Wakanda opens up to the rest of the world, right? Because Wakanda is very isolated. All the incidents that were happening, they kind of were removed from that. So it'll be interesting to see if they have a storyline where it's like, all right, Piltover Zon, no more happy days. We're going to open you up to the world.
I wonder if the show Arcane is gonna be that thing that breaches it. Which, I mean, I and I've said it before too. Like because again, if I'm not taking a deep dive on something ignorant, it's not a true Casuals of Runeterra episode for Hetch. So I still want to believe that Arcane is gonna end up tying like Jin and being chased by Shin and Zed into Piltover. Like Arcane's gonna tie that in together, which by all accounts is just not real, but I want to believe it. But as far as with what little bit that we know, it could be that like that is what's going to be like, yo, Piltover's on. You can't pretend that none of this is happening anymore. The real world is out there and it's coming to get you.
Yeah. And with that, because we can't give it all to you here, right? We gotta keep this content train rolling. But with that, thank you for listening as always, and we'll be back soon with the next episode.
Yep. Take care, everybody.